Hello, everybody. We are live. Welcome, everyone. Just going to give a minute for people to be able to join in. Hi, everyone. As soon as you're able to join in, please just drop a message in the chat so I can see that people are able to join in. I know that there's a bit of a delay that happens sometimes, so please just let me know as soon as you can see and hear us okay. Welcome, everyone. If you can hear me, if you can see me, please just give me a thumbs up. Okay. We're going to get the conversation started in a bit. So if you can hear me, please just drop a comment in the comment section to let me know. Okay, I see the comments coming in. This delay sometimes can be a bit confusing because it's almost like nobody can see, but I know people are here because I'm joining on a different device and it's a bit delayed on my end as well. Okay, we're just going to give 1 more minute for more people to be able to join in because I don't want you to miss anything that's going to happen here today. Mojishola, thank you very much. Okay, you can hear me. Thank you very much for confirming that. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. Mojishola, where are you joining from? Where are you joining from? Let me know, please. Just wish I could play elevator music so it's not so quiet. And that elevator music annoys me a lot. Now I'm thinking, oh my God, now I want it. Oh, you're from Nova Scotia. Thank you very much for joining. That's amazing. That's one part of Canada I haven't visited yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Atlantic side of things. Thank you very much for joining. Okay, more people are joining now. I'm glad to see you all. Welcome. Please let us know if you can hear me, if you can see us okay. Just please confirm in the chat and we will get this conversation going shortly. One more minute and we'll be live with the conversation. 1 more minute to get as more people to join in and we will carry on with the conversation. Mm-hmm. Hello, Abibo. Good evening. Welcome. Good evening. I take it that you're joining from somewhere in Nigeria or somewhere in Africa where it is evening. Please let us know where you're joining from. Okay, so it's 1:05. We're going to get the conversation started, and more people will join us as they're able to. As you join in, please leave a comment. Let me know where you're joining from. Let me know you can see and hear us. Okay. Okay, I see the comments coming in now. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Hi, Joanne. Thank you for joining from Lagos, Nigeria. Abibo, thank you for joining from Nigeria. Okay, it's 4 p.m. in Atlantic Canada. Yes, you guys are 3 hours ahead of us. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I am super excited about this conversation. I have looked forward to this for the longest time, guys. You don't want to know. Um, Today, I am joined by Praise Fowowe. For those of you who are OGs on this channel, Praise is not a stranger to you. But for the people who are finding me a little more recently and haven't had the chance to encounter Praise yet, I'm going to turn this to you, Praise, to tell us a bit about Praise Fowowe. Like, I know it's going to be impossible to talk about yourself in 2 minutes, but I'm starting a very hard question, asking you to talk about Praise in 2 minutes, which sounds a bit impossible, but I'll let you do that.
Okay. I mean, it was a question someone asked me, and I said to her that I am my mother's son, right? Because I think that's the most important way to introduce myself. I am praised for where I help families and individuals get better. That's the summary of everything I do. And I do that on the platform of coaching, training, certification programs. People like to say that I'm a school of thought, and I think I agree. I'm a curious soul who look for the simplest solution to the most difficult family life issues. And that I've done in the last 24 years of my life, working with different families across different continents and creating innovation that helps family live better. So I think that might be the best way to describe me. Yeah.
Nice. I think that's an interesting version, just given, maybe it's because of what I know. If I'm going to summarize you in a one sentence, praise for always a movement, period. Period. And you guys are about to find out why I said that. So praise is such a voice when it comes to family systems, building strong family systems, and I'm very excited about the knowledge that will be shared here today, and hopefully everybody who has joined, there's something for you to learn. So if you have friends who are not here, share this conversation with them. We're about to go to school. It's about to be a master class. Just make sure that your loved ones don't miss out. So in a couple of weeks ago, when I was recording the videos that have led up to these conversations, I've been talking a lot about building family systems on my channel.
Mm.
That's something that I have a heart for, like people living their lives to the fullest, being healthy individuals, being healthy couples, and then building healthy children. And the two movies, I've used two movies as like my base points conversations for the last two videos that I've done. One of them is a Nigerian movie on YouTube called Love in Every Word. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to see that. The other movie is Adolescence. It's a mini series on Netflix that was making rounds a couple of weeks back. Like everybody and their granny was talking about Adolescence. And I jumped on the train and just shared my thoughts about the movie. One thing stood out to me in both of these movies. Like there was a common theme with two of them. um it pointed back to faulty family systems.
Mhm.
Like when we look at Love in Every Word, just see somebody who was on a very self-sabotaging mission, like looking at her patterns and then coming to the point where we heard the story of her father. It made sense. It kind of made sense to me from the beginning. I looked at it, I'm like, there's trauma going on here, there's trauma here, and then we reached the end and we saw that there was actually trauma at play. I want us to start from there. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what would you say is the when we look at family systems, this conversation that we keep having, and it's almost like we're overflogging it. The importance of family systems, when we look at our society, we see it. We see that there is a need for us to continue to have this conversation. So if
Yeah.
you look at Love in Every Word as a movie, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on the movie generally, and how will you say that points to healthy family systems?
I think it was a very interesting movie. Interestingly, Omoni is my friend. So when I saw the movie, I know that she tries to do things differently, and I felt it was a departure from the normal Nigerian movies,
Mm-hmm.
where from the start you could literally tell what's eyes going on. I love the comedy and the energy the main actor brought into the movie. But getting into the nitty gritty of the real lesson, which is a faulty family system, it's served as a reminder of trauma. I think the biggest problem in the world can be defined as trauma. I've seen it everywhere. I've seen it play out in relationship, play it out. I've seen people, get damaged by the kind of family they grew up in. I have seen people pick up behaviors and habits, and not everyone is, has that level of awareness to say, I want to rebuild myself. People are not even aware that they're broken. They just think, it's like if you leave, if you've never been out of Nigeria, you would not know that some things, are possible. You just think that okay, there are behaviors that you consider normal, which is abnormal actually, but it's become a normal behavior because of the environment you found yourself. And so, a lot of the times, we say that every child that comes into this world comes very plain, right? And then the child is at the mercy of the handlers, and the handlers play a big role. And the handlers can come in form of your parents and the system they built. Everyone has got a form of system, intentionally or unintentional. The biggest challenge is that Africans naturally, they don't have an intentional history that dovetails into the system they are creating. So there is so much confusion. On one hand, you will hear people say, for example, I am from Ogun State or I'm from Imo State, right? Which means I'm a Yoruba man, I'm an Igbo man. The next minute, the same person is saying is a spiritual Jew. He's a Jew, because of by adoption, right? So, okay, what is your family history? He does not know. Now, when history is not properly curated, lives are going to be damaged. And I'll share a typical example. I was working with a lady who, she had gotten into a very bad marriage, all right? And then the guy totally brutalized her. It was domestic violence case, so she had left. And so I was taking her through because I wanted to know, how did you make this choice? And then she said to me, oh, praise, when I left school, I felt the next thing to do was get married. And then home front wasn't good. And so he was a friend, and then I got married to him. Instinctively, I asked her to, if she knew anything about her grandfather. Oh, she said, oh, yeah, I knew the man. What about your great grandfather? She said nothing, that she didn't know anything about the great grandfather. So I said, can we do a bit of digging and get into your history? Because I can't build you a new system if I don't understand where you're coming from. And so came back to me and she said, nobody seems to know anything about the great grandfather, as it were. I said, no, somebody must know. Maybe there are things they are hiding. So I said, okay, can you call someone who is in your village, who is elderly, send them gifts and let them tell you the story? And she went digging, and then when she came back, apparently the great grandfather ran away. His own father, the great grandfather, was a king. So they are from a lineage of kings in their original village. And then the great grandfather, who was heir to the throne, became a Christian. And then the Christian teaching says you can't be a king because of, traditional things they do. So he ran away. So he ran away and became a normal person, literally traded his royal heritage, right? And so when he gave back to children, the children had no clue that they were royalties, right? Who became a grandfather. Then our father, who was giving back to our grandfather, didn't know anything about the history. And then it came to her. Now, truth of the matter was that if she knew, if the great grandfather never ran away, she could have emerged as a princess, as a royalty. That awareness is enough for her not to even get married. She wouldn't even be talking to the person she eventually got married to, let alone getting married to him. So when systems are not intentionally built, it costs people dearly. So in that particular movie, right, you have a lady who was dealing with trauma. She was trying to avoid everything that looked like her father. And so you find out that when people have been damaged, they project their pain on other people. And
Absolutely.
that was what was happening. So even if Jesus stands in front of them, it's like trauma is like when you have your glasses, and then the screen is cracked. you cannot see beyond the cracked screen, right? You will never attain clarity no matter how much you try. And so that was what was happening to that girl. So everyone that looked like a father, she would chase them away. But then
Mhm.
she was falling in love for the wrong set of people because she had now. I mean, there were things in that movie that a lot you need to be a professional to spot it out. There was something that was silent, that wasn't communicated, but I could spot also, which it was the fact that most likely that lady was the
Can
firstborn.
you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Hello, Prince. Okay.
I
We
can
we
hear you.
froze for a bit.
Did I freeze? I think it was. Yeah.
We both froze. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
can hear you now, though. I can hear you
Okay.
now.
So it's I mean it looks very clear from here. So
Okay.
the lady most likely was the firstborn. Now, one of the things that we don't properly communicate as firstborn is the fact that a lot of firstborn children are expected to act right, live right, become number one. And so their original personality is crushed. And so she grew up taking responsibility for other people because you want to check her behavior of sponsoring a boyfriend, the eventual girl that she
Santa Claus. She was Santa
was a
Claus for
serious
everybody.
that was a severe syndrome in there, right?
Mhm.
To say that she was literally raised to take responsibilities for her siblings. And so she literally was looking for love, and in looking for love, part of what has been communicated or conditional to be is to buy love, is to take care of people, take responsibilities for the responsibility of the people in her life, such that when she now meets someone who wants to take responsibility for her, she begins to feel that they have an ulterior motive because she has been conditioned to be taking care of other people. And so that's a trauma response in there. It was not pronounced, but I can see it. Right. And so when people don't create the ideal environment for a child's wholesomeness to emerge, you will have all those kind of things playing out. And that's why we always say to parents that when a child is born, whosoever that child is going to be is in your hand, right?
That's
Between
true.
the distance between childhood and adulthood is handling, right? If you like, take the child for a child education and say he's going to become a man of God. If you don't create a man of God environment in your family, the child might end up becoming a porn star, might end up becoming an addict and things like that, right? And so it's the lack of effective system that's intentionally curated, that led to what that lady became. And then I guess she was lucky that the guy was persistent.
Yeah.
Because in real life, it doesn't play out that way. It does.
Exactly. It was a feel good movie for me, right? I know that okay, some parts like he bought an entire building to collect phone number, like what's going on? And you have touched a lot on some of the questions I was going to ask you, which is amazing. But before we move to the actual building those systems, I want you to touch a bit on adolescence. And
Mhm.
the reason why I want you to talk about that, it still comes back to what you just said about handling, about the distance between when a child is born and when they become an adult. It's the
Mhm.
handling, it's that environment they're in. Who's the person who's handling this child? And we saw it play out in adolescence as well.
Yeah.
Again, that faulty family system. But in
Yes.
this case, I want you to talk about adolescence from the angle of like identity and sexual education. Now, the reason why I want us to touch a bit about sexual education is that adolescence, it revealed many things, but it touched briefly on something that I went to read up about, and it can be a bit of a disturbing trend if people don't know what to do. And that's the rise of the incel culture.
Mhm.
Now, for the people who don't know incel stands for involuntary celibate. From what I saw, it started as a random um, social media thing where somebody who was willing to date but was not finding suitable partners started it and said, I'm willing to date, but nobody seems to want to date me. What's happening? And everybody who was in that situation came together and said, oh, me too, me too. So it was supposed to be like something that people used to support each other to find suitable partners.
Mhm.
But it has just morphed into this whole idea that the man is the king, the man is the prize, no woman should be able to turn you down. It's this very toxic superiority complex. And for the parents on the call, you should go and read up about it and learn more about Intel. And when that boy in adolescence was found to be linked to that kind of incel because of some Instagram posts and things like that. It came back to that, the lack of self-identity, the low self-esteem, and just the zero understanding of sexual education. And I
Mhm.
want you to talk about that. Like, from your experience, what are you seeing? What are the trends that parents should be aware of? And how can we mitigate against those negative patterns?
Okay, so I don't like to major on problems because, as typical of me, trends will always come, right? And so incel is the buzzword now. Everybody's going to be carrying that. People are going to turn it to prayer point. People are going to, and because there's a whole lot going on in the life of the child, the focus has to be on how to raise a child to be able to distinguish between what is healthy and unhealthy, between what is necessary and unnecessary, right? And so, I mean, like in Canada, we're tracking a new fear called the fear of growing up among African children in Canada. And what's the fear of growing up? 15, 16-year-olds don't want to celebrate 17-year-old or 18-year-old. They don't want to become 19-year-old because they begin to, they're looking at their parents and how stressed they are trying to make ends meet. And they are looking at adulthood and it's looking like adulthood is stress, right? So they would rather want to remain 15-year-old or 16-year-old and get all the things from daddy and mommy without them even doing anything for themselves. Now, there's an entire group dealing with that. And so there are so many things that people are dealing with. Incel. I mean, if you're the truth about with all the buzzword about incel, if you go to a village in Arochukwu, a child in a teenager in Arochukwu does not know anything about incel. All right. There are several places where you would need a phone. The phone has to be internet enabled for you to have access to the guy who was leading the movement. And that's the thing. You see, when good people don't lead a movement, you abdicate your responsibility to the hand of someone who is
Absolutely.
troubled himself and is going to trouble other people, right? So if you look at the guy who leads the incel community, you realize that that's a troubled young person, who has a lot of trauma and then it's become toxic masculinity, right? That is masquerading as, and because these days everybody can form a community, anybody can create a tribe, anybody can lead a tribe, anybody can sound woke, and then the people that are following will follow him. The question is your child going to follow? Right? Your child not following is not you tiptoeing and find out, okay, what are the problems? What are the signal? What are the cues? No. The most important thing is what system have you built? And then have you been able to understand your role as a parent at every milestone in the life of your child? Right? To say that ages 0 to 3, you are supposed to be a scout. Your job is to observe. That's the age of observation. Observe your child, interpret their behavior, and then build based on what the signal your child is sending to you. Because from ages 4 to 6, you are a model. At that age, you have to model competence, you have to model clarity, you have to model hard work, you have to model reading culture, right? And so, a lot of the between when your child was 4 to 6, what did they see you do? Right? And were you the kind of parent who were perpetually on your phone? If that was who you were, your child, you were modeling addiction, phone addiction to your child. And your child is the day you hand over, and his phone to him, is going to become that. And so there is no internet education, there is no phone, terms and conditions. Parents give phones to 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds. In fact, latest iPhone is what they are giving to those kind of children. And so when the parents themselves need to be parented, how do they even raise a child properly? Right? From ages 7 to 9, you move from being a model to an instructor. That's the age where you create your family educational system. And then you have to intentionally teach your children that every day. Now, from ages 10 to 12, that's friendship, right? That's when you now need to get your children to teach you stuff. In fact, if you don't rent a space in their head and they are not able to teach you, you won't know exactly what is going on in their life because for what is what, some of us are now older. I see how time is fly. We now look very old because a lot of the younger generation are doing stuff. And so to keep up with them, it's like keeping up with their games. You can't
Mhm.
keep up except they bring you in. But if you have done a good job, because the report card in the teenage years is the work done in the toddling years, right? If you have done a good job, your child will see those things. Your child will determine by himself, no matter the kind of pressure this is not for me. This thing is not healthy. But wherein you have not intentionally raised your child to differentiate between what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Your child doesn't even know where to draw the line, right? What you're going to have is a situation where you're going to hear this one and you're going to form prayer point. You're going to, and we want God to miraculously solve every problem, to mask what we have failed to do as a people, right? Because from ages 13 to 18, thereabout, you are a coach. You balance perspective, you engage them. You can now lord it over them or argue because children want to be part of it, especially if you're raising Generation Z and Alpha. If you are giving birth this year, you are giving birth to a generation better because better generation starts from this year. Now, the problem is we are still trying to understand Generation Z. Alpha has overtaken them. Now, beta is being born, right? And but then don't get yourself worked up over little semantics. What you need to focus on are the principles. Principles are universal. It's application that is different. If to
Mhm.
master the principle that you need to raise a wholesome child, because once you your response to your child is anger, and you don't know that on subliminally you are traumatizing your child. What begins to happen is that once a child is traumatized, whether through your shouting and yelling and many things, what begins to happen is there is a vacuum in the life of that child. And once there's a vacuum in the life of the child, he begins to look for anywhere to feel among, to belong. And so if you find yourself in an insult community where they say, you know what, you are a good man, you are a great man, you can become a God that everybody worships. Yeah, it resonates with him and he finds himself. But if the child is already aware that he's a God, that is a powerful person, is an exceptional guy, there's nothing they say in those insult community that will get to him. So our job is not to bother about what evil is doing. Our job is to shine the light. And that's where I love to stay. Because I have no control about what evil is doing. Evil will keep doing what
Absolutely.
evil
Mhm.
will do best. But what is light doing? Right? So every time evil overpowers light, it's either that light is not light or that light is compromised. So that is where I love to stay in the whole of all of this.
Amazing, amazing. You said something that jumped at me. You said when the parent needs to be reparented,
Mhm.
and it seems like that's where majority of us are stuck. And it makes me laugh when I hear people say, especially adults who are which one am I? I'm a millennial. When I hear adults say things like, "Oh, this is what our parents did, and we turned out right," my default answer is always, "Did we turn out right though? Like, are we? Do we want to go there? Did we really turn out right?" What are we going to use as measurement to say we turned out right? Because when I look all around us, it is walking trauma that I see. It's not, we didn't really turn out right. We just want to tell ourselves that. So for the people out there who have unresolved trauma, unresolved issues that are interfering with the adults that they are today,
Mm.
where can somebody like that start from? But because before I can become a wholesome parent, I have to be a wholesome individual myself.
Yeah.
Now that I know that I have unresolved issues from my past, it is interfering with the adult that I am, it is interfering with the wife that I am, and of course, it is interfering with the kind of parent that I am. Where can a person like that start from? What would
You've
be your advice to them?
you've got to work with a professional. The big problem in that statement is that which professional? Because it's not just working with a professional, is the kind of professional. And so
Absolutely.
what has happened over time, I've met Africans who are working with therapists, who are, white, or other culture, who don't understand the nuances of the African culture. And so some of them have been in therapy for 7 years. And I'm like, what are you doing in therapy in 7 years? I mean, you've become a going concern. And if you are not careful, right? You're already a business plan. Because what are you doing really? And you're talking to someone. I mean, so a lot of our people need to understand that I would rather work with an African who understands me, right, and is able to take me because you see, the working with people who are dealing with trauma is a lot of work, right? Number one, our people don't know who to talk to. Number two, they don't even want to pay for those sessions, right? But you see, I always tell people that if you postpone it, it's coming back to meet you someday, right? And so, what people need to do is to first ask for help, right? Because help is available, right? What you just now need to do is to now, I mean, in fact, what we're doing right now is when people say to me, oh, Praise, this is too expensive. Okay, what is your budget? Because what I do, especially for people in diaspora, say, oh, this is my budget. I'm able to pick one practitioner from Africa and link them, right? So that they can pay, whatever they call whatever. Because you will need people to work with. A lot of people are working trauma. They are not even aware. that they are living with trauma, but they are exhibiting behavior. So, for example, you get angry easily. You are shouting, you are yelling. Those are trauma response. You say that no grief for anybody. You know, when people do something against you, you are quick to cut them off. I cut them off. I cut them off. Those are trauma response. You are not promoting wholesomeness. The power every human being has is the power to self-regulate, is the power to be happy regardless of what happens inside of you, outside of you. So you see a lot of people trying to be happy by what they are doing for people. And so when it looks like they can't do anything for people, they feel irrelevant. And that begins to upset them. Or when you think your happiness is dependent on the people around you, your happiness cannot be dependent on the people around you. It's dependent on your husband, dependent on your wife, dependent on your children. It cannot be, right? Because you need to understand that human beings are products of choice and people are free to choose whatever they want to choose. But you are also free to be happy by yourself. But then, if you see the way people are raised, when a child cries, what do? Instead of trying to understand the child, we give him feeding bottle. So we are teaching him happiness, or what will silence you is outside of you. If he persists, we hand him a phone or a tablet, and the child keeps quiet. What you are saying to him is that you are literally conditioning him to continue to look for what makes him happy outside of himself. And that's where many of us have been raised. And so a lot of the times you need to understand that as much as prayer is good, prayer alone does not solve that problem. Behavioral problem require behavioral solution. You know, I always tell people, you know, when they quote Jesus sometimes, I said, are you aware that Jesus did not just pray out every problem? He was meeting with a woman by the well. That was talk therapy going on there. A lot of people can't spot it. He saw a guy who was blind, right? He was asking the most important question any professional will ask, what do you want me to do for you? He didn't assume, right? And so they just think, oh, Jesus was all about miracle. No, he was human. The way he interacted with people, he demonstrated mastery. So people need to get help and to understand that help is now available. I mean, you can reach out to people, reach out to Marina. Marina knows a network of people who can work with you. I know a network of people who can work with you. There are people I work with myself, but we have all kinds of people who are Afrocentric in their nature, right? I was working with someone who had been in therapy for 5 years, and the lady was describing to the person she was working with that when she was back in Nigeria, that every time she came third in class, her father would strip her naked and flog her. You know what the therapist was saying? He said she was hallucinating, that behavior was not possible, right? And so, and I don't blame her because that doesn't sound right based on the worldview that she has and where she's coming from. But this person is saying this is what happened, but I can relate with it because I mean I know how many people your father will strip you naked and flog you, you know, in Africa. You know, so it's a whole lot to unpack. But you see, the biggest journey you can go is that journey into self-discovery, self-awareness, and personal freedom. Because when you attain personal freedom, things will no longer move you, right? You become wholesome. And when you become wholesome, you can pass wholesomeness to other people. At that level, nothing, you know, gets to you because you have mastered how to self-regulate and how to be happy in spite of everything around.
I totally hear you with that, dealing with professionals, with therapists who are professionals in every sense of the word. But I find that when they don't understand the nuances that comes with being African, especially with me being an African in the diaspora, they don't understand when I say I have to support family members back home. They're looking at me like, what are you on about? Like, support them, why? Like, I had a friend who lost a family member in childbirth, and she took over. The newborn survived. She took over the newborn, literally adopted the child, and she has been raising that child for going on 3 years. And the grief therapy she was working with was like, why did you have to do that? The child's father is alive. Just send. I'm like, no, in the African setting, in our the way how communal we are, you don't look away from a situation like that and leave a man who just lost his wife to now be raising a baby. Like, they're professionals, but they don't get it. So if you have an opportunity to talk to a professional, it will be in your best interest to talk to somebody who understands where you're coming from. I find the same thing with doctors. Like when I'm dealing with a doctor and I say, this is how I'm feeling, I'm getting symptoms that look like malaria. My doctor knows what I'm talking about because they can relate. There are some other doctors I can't have that conversation with.
Oh, yeah.
So it's always important to know the kind of therapist you're talking to. Prayer
Mhm.
has its place, and I'm happy you talked about that. Prayer has its place. The role of the pastors, they have their place. You need to understand that a pastor is not necessarily equal to a professional therapist. Those
Mhm.
two roles are very distinct, and we put our pastors in those positions sometimes. It's almost like they now have to take on this responsibility that they are not fully trained in, not fully aware of, because that's the role that we've given them. So
Mhm.
in finding professionals, make sure you're dealing with grounded professionals. And like Praise said, I'm a member of a network of professionals that are specialized in different areas. Like whatever it is you're looking for, parenting, trauma, grief, whatever it is, I belong to a network of professionals who can support you. So Praise, to talk about actual family systems.
Mhm.
I know what that looks like because I have gotten help. I have gotten trained. I understand family systems. For somebody who is on this call right now, is realizing that they're carrying trauma, now realizes that they need to get some help in dealing with some of the issues that are in the way of them becoming wholesome, but they're already married, they already have children.
Mhm.
When we say building healthy family systems, what exactly does that look like? Like for me, who's a parent here, I have no idea. I've never been involved in any kind of training like this, but I want my children to be okay. I don't want them to have the kind of life that I had. I don't want to project my trauma on them. So I'm going to go and get help and deal with my trauma. But how can I build an actual healthy family system?
Okay. It's the easiest way to describe it is 1 plus 1 must be equal to 2. As Africans, naturally, our culture is built on emotion. Our current culture, not our original culture. Our original culture was built on systems. Our current culture is built on emotion. And our culture history was diluted, destroyed during colonial era. But it
Mhm.
doesn't mean colonialism caused every problem. Colonialism only amplified what has been. Because if you check historically, the first world power wasn't America, wasn't the Roman Empire, was the Egyptian Empire, right? But the Egyptian Empire collapsed because of the same problem African communities are still having everywhere you find them, right? Infighting from within. Everybody trying to set up their small shops instead of collaborating.
Mhm.
That was what destroyed Egyptian Empire, Malian Empire, the Mansa Musa. Succession was what destroyed that one, right? And so our people implode from within. Now, when you now look at nations that are now called world power, nations that are called great. What makes nations great? Nations that are great, number one is rule of law. Number two, in fact, before rule of law, is value for the human life, right? And that's why in nations like Canada, America, nobody will suffer gunshot, and then you will drive him to the nearest hospital, and the first question they're asking is go and take police report. It's never going to happen. Why? You save a life first before you even figure out what is going on. But we know countries where the guy is halfway dead. They are saying go and bring police report, drop money, and all those things. So a lot of people die needless death. Why? The system is built on emotion. Emotion is nobody knows what to expect. The man at the top is the man that knows what to expect. I mean, know what must be done, right? And so historically, we had kings, and the law is with the king. The king knew the law. Then our parents, because the king is usually a male, so we have the patriarchal society where the man automatically assumes leadership, whether he has sense or he doesn't have sense. He just becomes leadership simply because he's a man. And so when he gets married, he believes that his authority is questioned when people around him. I mean, he's a totalitarian leader. Nobody can ask him questions, and that is what you still see. Whether in the religious space or in leadership space in Africa, right? And so, even though we are now evolved and we say leadership is service, that even though we read it in the Bible, he that seeks to be the leader, that thing does not apply to the African man because a leader must be feared. When a leader is coming, you have to cring, you have to shake. So, in fact, daddy must be feared. Daddy is an unkillable killer. Daddy is not a proper father who needs to love. Now, when you first understand that there is a cultural challenge, right, then you will now know that what are the implications of our emotional system, right? It's very clear right in front of us to say that you vote a leader but you can't call him out when he begins to misbehave, right? Because you're afraid he will send people to arrest you and stuff like that. That's emotional, right? And then so you realize that consistently it shows up in schools, it shows up everywhere. If a policeman flags you down in Canada, for example, where you are, it never crosses your mind to bring out, Canadian dollar and say, okay, let me go now.
Roger.
Never go happen, right? Because I mean, I was flying from New York to Dallas, and I checked in my bag, and then I got to the airport. I was just supposed to drop my bag, and then for what is what I was looking for the counter, and by the time I got there, they told me I was 1 minute late, and because of that, they had to rebook my flight. Right? I missed Nigeria that day. I say Nigeria, me. The flight was still 1 hour to departure, 59 minutes to departure. They had to rebuke me, right? Rebook my flight. So, what makes great nation great is systems, not emotion. And system is built on precision. Precision is 1 + 1 must be equal to 2. And so, a family must be able to come together and ask fundamental questions. What is our family vision? A vision is a mental picture of a preferred future. Where are we going as a family? Now, if you ask a typical family to write their family vision down, you will be shocked that husband and wife will write different things. Children will write different things. So they wonder why there is a lot of infighting, a lot of challenges from within the family. It's simply because there was no clarity. And so once you don't have a mental picture of a preferred future, all your system is going to be faulty. You are not going to be depending on luck, right? Because I was having a conversation last week, just observing the tariff war between America and China. And I realized that China locked themselves against the rest of the world, and they built something within their system that has made them now become, maybe China is the next global world power. Everybody can see it, right? But how did they get to that level? I was studying China, and I realized that the percentage of Chinese who are Christians is 2.1. The percentage of Chinese who are Muslim is maybe 1.3% now. So Christian and Muslim in China, less than 5%. Now, without Jesus, without Prophet Muhammad, how did China build this kind of nation that everybody goes to? If you want the cheapest, the whatever, it is China you go. Then I began to study that China has what they call Chinese traditional religion, which is a combination of Shinto, Confucius, and Buddhism, right? And that is built around their culture. And so they built it into a system that everybody's taught. The same thing Japan is. Japan has 7 national values that is taught from home. The educational system is built on it. It's built on precision planning. So the Jewish have the same system. If you pick a 7-year-old Jew, you know what he knows. The Indians have a semblance of that system right now. And that's why when you see them collaboration is not easy for people who don't believe the same thing. But because they believe they have their own national religion, Hinduism and Buddhism came from India, by the way, right? They are able, their belief system is the same. Now, for some of us who are Christian, it depends. You now say, am I a redeemed Christian? Am I a covenant Christian? Am I because ideologies? So these are little things that we don't see that makes it impossible for us to build systems. Now, when you now understand systems intelligence, you now come together as a family. Let's say you're married already. Simple way to go about this is, even though you still need a professional to guide you, however, call everybody and ask them if your dream family can come true, what would it look like? Let everybody write, right? You will be shocked what everybody will write. Now, from what everyone has written, there's a 5-step process we use to now create the family vision, right? Only a professional can take you through that. But from what everybody, because your vision must incorporate the collective desires of everyone. When some people feel left out, there is nothing they're going to do, right? And so once you create that vision, everything you now do is built on it. Your values is derived from the vision. So you cannot live how you want to live. You must live how you need to live to produce that outcome, because everything fits into that outcome. So we are judging your behavior by where we are headed. So this behavior, how does it lead us to where we want to go? If it doesn't lead, you cannot. Then you create what looks like a constitution. Then you now begin to build system to say, what will be our communication system in this family? So based on one to raise royalties, we cannot shout, right? Even though there's shouting software installed in you from your father and your mother, you cannot shout. You have to negotiate, or you have to learn communication. That's the communication system. We say, okay, what is our immigration system? Who can live with us? And how do we determine who can live with us? Do you bring someone from the village and the person is shouting and cursing your children and you can't correct them? Or the person is telling your wife, we married you, your husband's sister, and so I have authority in this family. You know how people give them a mouth. So you need to create to say, okay, who is the citizen of this family? The citizens are husband, wife, children. Every other person is a visitor. All right. And what do you give visitors that are coming in? You first give them visitors visa, right? Visitors visa is to say, let us test whether you overstay your welcome, whether you are suitable before we issue you permanent residency. So you don't just give permanent residency because a visitor can become a terrorist, and you don't negotiate with terrorists, you deport terrorists. And so if you don't understand what is the entry and the exit system, it will implode. There are people who have brought people who they are brother from the village to come into their family, who started using pornography, started exposing their children to pornography, and destroyed them. What failed there was the entry system. It was too porous, right? And then you want to have the economic system to say, what kind of quality of life do we need to live? How do we generate income? See, this is a conversation. What is our domestic educational system? How do we ensure that we create a learning system that can produce the outcome in the, so you will know what your children need to know, who they need to study. Once you have done that right, you won't worry about children, they are going after games and stuff like that. So people need to understand as Africans that system was not natural with us. The only way system will be natural with you if you have the father who had awareness and a set of that system. So you will learn by observation. So I said to every African that we are the first generation of Africans who will now need to go back to system intelligence, but we need to humble ourselves to actually, in fact, it's so bad that people are unwilling to do it that we've had to institute a free 6-week class in North America for people who are just coming in because marriages are collapsing. And they will say, oh, it's not America that is making. No, North America is not what is making your marriage collapse. North America simply writes an exam for what you call your marriage in Nigeria or Cameroon or wherever you're coming from. And then it does not pass that test because it's lack of system. So when people come in here, the children are malleable. They blend almost immediately. You see it in their accent. After 6 months, they start speaking like Canadians or Americans. The women blend also, right? But the men are the last to join the whatever because our brain is still stuck somewhere. And I'm a man, so I know what I'm talking about. It's still stuck somewhere. And so if you don't at that point to say, what kind of family do we want to raise? You'd realize that counterculture will come in and then chaos will start. And that is why everybody needs to come together to say, okay, what kind of family? Your family has got to look like a nation. And so in becoming that nation, how do we all collaborate to build this nation, right? Once we determine that end, we can build every other thing around.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Like even me, I'm learning so much from this. Just listening to some of these concepts again is sparking new ideas for me. When you talked about the entry system, like when we open up our families to visitors who could be family members, who could be friends, they come in and they wreak havoc basically with our children because the entry system is porous. It takes me to that idea when we say it takes a village to raise a child. So I was born in Nigeria. I live in Canada now, and I understand the value of having a support system that would help here. Because coming to a country like this, reintegrating, and for some people, it's like you're playing catch up. Sometimes the parents are not as available as they can be for the children, and that's where that community comes in. I agree. When they say it takes a village, I say yes and no. It does not take a random village to raise a child. It's not a random village. And when I try to explain it, people are like, you have never been in positions where you need somebody to watch your child. It is a random person that is watching your child. Sometimes they can wreak more havoc that will last a lifetime for that child. Mm-hmm. So would you put if the person has been listed on a register as maybe like a sex predator or somebody who is a pedophile, would you say because that's your only option, you are going to go and drop your child with that person because it takes a village? If you know that person is on that kind of list, would they be a part of your village? So for the people who are new, relatively new in countries that they now live in that is different from like their country of birth, or even people in their countries of birth who are looking for that support system for their families, what should we be looking out for? Like, what should our actual support system look like, as against just having any random person gain access to our families and maybe create damage at the end of the day?
Okay, so when they say it takes a village to raise a child, they didn't say, I mean, it's an indefinite article, right? It's not a definite, they didn't say it takes the village to raise a child, a village, right? And so if you understand English a little bit, right, it means that it's not specified, right? Because if they say it takes the village, then it talks about the village you came
The
out from.
specific one,
And
yeah.
so if you send your child back to your village, let's say you are from Ibadan, and you send your child back to your village, next time your child sees you, he will have tribal marks, right? I don't know if you will like that. He will start speaking Ibadan, so, and he will speak like, I mean, apologies to people who are from Ibadan, who are listening to me. And if you are not a Nigerian, Ibadan is the biggest city in West Africa. It's an ancient city, very lovely place, right? And so it then means that you need to choose your village, right? And so your village is a group of people whose culture and values align with your values. And so with the advent of the internet, you can actually choose, create a virtual village, right? And so a virtual village can start, or it can even be a physical village where 5 families, 6 families. In fact, once you have like more than 4 families coming together, that's already a village. And so you come together to say, you know what, we have similar vision. We want to raise our children and become exceptional in this Canada, right? And you see Indians do that all the time, right? And say, okay, you know what, this family, we are going to all be studying things. You focus on the economy, you focus on the education. How do we, so this family A, ensure that you study the system, ask questions. When you're coming for the next meeting, you're going to tell us how our children can gain scholarship in Ivy League School. That's your own assignment. This one, what businesses can we do? You have to do that research. Shadow the Indians, shadow the Pakistanis, find out what businesses they are doing. You bring it back to us because we're going to collaborate to empower everyone. Okay, you do this and da 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 da. Da. That's what it, because the problem is that many of our people come in and then they want to build a village. They want to build a village. What they eventually build is a movement of people who don't like themselves, and it becomes a gossip base. And that's why you realize that people, they hardly collaborate for
Mhm.
any big thing, because they're, I mean, I went to Canada one day and I sat in a group and the report, everybody reported everybody's pulling everybody down. Like, what's the meaning of this? Right? And that's why if you don't carefully choose your, we say that, especially for those of us who live in the diaspora, that the hand of the person you land when you come here can determine your fate within the next 10 years. Right?
100%.
And
Yeah.
so it becomes very important for us as a people to say, what type of family do you want to have? Who are those people whose values resonate with your values, right? And so once you find the families whose values resonate with your values, you can call a meeting and say, okay, you know what? I think I like your values. Because what it means is that when you're not around, your children can be with them, and you're sure your children
Absolutely.
will be taken care of, right? So you've got to choose the village that resonates with, because when you not even choose the village, you now even need to determine the general vision of the village, the norms, because what it takes to build a culture, there's a framework of building a culture. You need to come to terms with all those things and now say, you know what, we're going to be meeting, because you don't want to belong to a village where you are doing all the work and everybody sits down, and when things come, they come and share, because that's one thing a lot of our people, our experts, are doing. When it's the time for the heavy lifting, they go awoke. But
Whoa.
everything is now, they now say, I don't, African. No. So that's why you need to choose, and you need to be specific on what you need everyone to do, right? And so don't just say it takes a village and then go and dump your child where your child is going to be totally destroyed.
Okay. If you have any questions, you can use the chat box to specify your question, and Praise will try to answer as many of them as possible. If you are enjoying this, please give this video a thumbs up. You can still share it for other people to join, because you would agree with me that it is truly has been a masterclass. A lot of things for us to learn here. Praise, as we begin to wrap up this part before we go into like the question part proper, one other thing I'd like you to touch on, like when we talk about these families in the diaspora, there's a lot of, I don't know what to call it, when we say, when people come from African countries and they come abroad, they no longer want to do things the way we do it in our culture.
Mhm.
I have struggled a lot with that because there's this silent pressure that it puts on us, especially as African women. It seems like we're on the receiving end of that misconception or that generalization that when we come abroad, you no longer want to do things the way we do it in our culture. And there's
Mhm.
always this consistent reference to say, also, how do the Indians do it? How come they don't divorce as much as we're seeing broken families and divorce rates among African families?
True.
I don't. The major reason why I struggle with that when they say it's not our African culture, I don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
When you say African culture, which one? Is it Nigerian? Even if you now say, okay, no, let's narrow it down to Nigeria. Which part of Nigeria? I'm
Good.
from southern Nigeria. The way I know things in South Nigeria is different from the way it is in the north. It's different from the
Yeah.
way it is. So what exactly this African culture that we keep pointing to and saying when the women get abroad, they no longer want to do like our African. What exactly does that mean? And from your experience, when we reference the Indians and the Pakistanis and these other communities who appear to have their things um, more like they have things going from what we see. What
Mhm.
do you think is the difference? Like, is it our the history that is lost, or what exactly is happening? Why does this happen with the African culture? Even though I still struggle with what that's really means.
Yesterday, interestingly, I was having a conversation with one of my favorite people, and she asked me a question. Praise, do you think there is hope for Nigeria? And you know my response. I said, which of the Nigeria are you talking about? I said, because people just make blanket statements, right? I said, because there is the Nigeria, the country, which is a geographical area.
Mhm.
The Nigeria, the nation, does not exist at the moment. It looks like it exists, it doesn't. So I now began to explain what a nation means. So the same way when we say Africans, what do we mean exactly? What are the ethos? What is the vision? What are the values you are looking out for? We don't have it documented, right? But I understand what they're trying to say. To say, hey, you used to cook in Africa, so we expect you to cook in America. But the other part of it is, oh, our mother used to cook for our father, but your mother was not going to work, right? So maybe I should stay at home and you can bring in 100%. I'm happy to stay at home, right? So naturally, culture is defined as the way of life of the people at every point in time. Now, usually people don't have that at every point in time because culture is progressive.
Mhm.
Now, or even let's say culture is not progressive, before you can say this is an acceptable culture, there are parameters you must filter it through, and there are tests it must pass. One, how well does it promote the dignity of person? If your culture does not promote the dignity of person, then it cannot be unacceptable. So if your culture believes that women can be slapped, right, or men can cheat and women must forgive, but women cannot cheat and men must forgive, your culture is already compromised,
Yeah.
right? And so that is where, and then you are now beginning to ask the question, who are the originators of the culture? What was their worldview when they created this culture? What was their exposure level? What was the agenda? Because oftentimes what we call culture also has an agenda, and the agenda is often selfish, right? I can point at so many parts of our culture that you look at it and say, what was the thinking behind it? Now, having said that, there are elements that cut across every African nation. For example, hospitality is us, right? Whether you are East, you are whatever, we just are very hospitable to our detriment because that was how we brought in the whites and then they started trading and we started selling our people, right? Fun is part of our whatever. So you can see this, people are dying, party is still going on. When it's time for party, everybody shows up, all right? We spoil the money as if even America, whether whatever, we are the only ones who shoot gun, who shoot currency in parties, right? We don't care. We are still going to go and suffer the following day, but let us spoil the thing and show that we have arrived. Anyway, these are things that we could have documented. Now, having said that, the Indians, you must understand that every nation that you realize that their people are able to do things together, they usually have an homogeneous religion. right? And so the most difficult nations to penetrate are the countries where their religion and their culture is intertwined, right? So the Indian Hinduism, which is the religion most of them practice, is a way of life. There's a documentation around it. For example, Diwali, you can't celebrate Diwali anyhow. There is a prescribed way
Absolutely.
of celebrating Diwali. And if you check the content of Diwali, it's a behavioral transformational process, but it looks like a celebration because there's a part of the Diwali, there's a day where you're supposed to bring out gold and maybe, that is teaching a wealth mentality, right? I mean, you see precision, you see mathematics in Hinduism and Buddhism. And so you see all these things. So a lot of the Indians have learned some of these things. So when they come together, you know what to expect when you meet an Indian. You know what to expect when you meet a Japanese, because they also have this kind of thing. The Jews, Judaism is, in fact, it's so interesting that Jews don't believe, they are not Christians. They don't believe in New Testament, but they conquer nations. How are they able to do it? Judaism is a way of life. It's compulsory. There are things you need to learn. Now, so Jews have Judaism, Indians have Hinduism, Chinese have Chinese traditional religion, which is their culture, right? Other people have Taoism or whatever. What do we have as Africans? What is our religion? We don't have, right? And so our way of life is subject to what the leader of the sect you follow is teaching, right? And so on one hand, we say, oh, respect elders. But when elders begin to infringe on your right, you say we cannot call out elder, right? Is that a fear culture, right? And so the real issue is when we come out here, our culture, the parts of our culture that is not built on value for human life, is revealed. He gets his report card. Because when people now come to realize, people are empowered here, you treat people better here, there are things, so they begin to make demands to say, oh, why are these people? And so what we should have done is to say, okay, for example, a man marries a woman in some African culture and then believes that he has acquired her because he paid bride price. And so the lady says, oh, can you help us fix breakfast? As far as it's concerned, that is a woman's job. Now, if that is what comes to your mind, that is a woman's job to cook, it's a parenting problem. Parenting failed you because my own mother put me in the kitchen to say human beings eat, human beings should cook, right? And so when you say, oh, help us clean the house, in his brain, I am helping my wife. The wife is not the cleaner. The narrative should be, I am keeping my family clean.
Yeah.
So you can see those gaps. So a guy who believes I'm helping my wife to clean the house, instead of I am keeping my family clean, when he gets to diaspora, he's going to have a problem, right? He's going to have a problem because it's not, the guy is not to blame. The DNA and the conditioning he has been subjected to is what is playing out, right? And that's why we need to be a bit empathetic, right? And that is why when they come in, we need to teach them how family systems work. Because family systems, if there is input of everyone, it's just going to be, hey, we continue the way we've always done it, right? But what needs to happen is that there must be humility on both sides to understand that you don't know. And the dynamics of living abroad is totally different across board, right? You cannot abdicate the responsibility of child rearing to raising to women, cooking to women, but she still has to go to work because what you are earning cannot absolutely take care of the family. And then because our communication has been messed up, we feel that when somebody disagrees with you, the person is rude.
Not
Me,
submissive.
every human being, she was not brought up the way you were brought up. She disagreement with another person is a normal human behavior to say
Yeah.
the way I see it is different from the way, and two people can see things differently, and both of them are correct.
True.
But we always believe that no, the ones I see this way, so we can all see that you are leading this family inside the ditch, but you expect us to follow you and not question you. because you are the leader of the family. So we say that the leader of a nation is not the smartest, it's not the richest, it's not the biggest, it's not even the most influential. It's the servant leader who has learned to maximize the resources around him to become the best version of himself. Right? So the moment, and that calls to question, when you look at your wife, what do you see? If what you see is a servant, you will never want to hear anything she has to say. If what you see is a friend, a teammate, then collaboration comes in. So men who have those mentality of collaboration, she's my mate, he would not, sometimes my wife says some things, and then somebody says, didn't she say it in a rude manner? I'm like, she spoke English. How did you? Is there part of the things she said now in English that looks rude, right? Maybe it's the way you are receiving it. I don't see there's anything, right? Because we argue about a lot of things, right? And then if I don't even like the way I will say it, so I don't like the way it could have been better. But it's as bad as people are chatting, and then you can pick the voice in the chat that this person is rude simply because they're asking simple questions, right? And so we literally have to understand that if we backtrack a bit and begin to promote the dignity of persons, to say that my wife is not a dullard, is not an idiot, she has a brain, she can interpret. In fact, she's a manager at work. They didn't make her a manager because she's a woman. They made her a manager because she's competent and she's leading men.
Yeah.
And the men defer to her. And then she comes home, and then you look at her from the standpoint of you're just a mere wife. It's what Nigerians call see finish, right? And so she cannot talk. She now needs to keep quiet, because so when these women now realize that, other women can talk, so why can't we? They now say, is that? But that doesn't also mean that there's no other extreme, because I've seen that where people come here and then they join some funny groups, and before you know it, they start teaching them against their husband and stuff. So there are those things, and that's fear. But you see, fear must not make you paralyze someone who has the capacity to do well for the family. I mean, if you don't, this person has always supported the family. Both of you should actually come together. But you see, in all of this conversation, the simple thing that is missing is family vision. Once the family vision is not in place, see, every other thing will be symptomatic. It's symptoms that people are talking about. She's rude to me. She's rude. What type of family do you want to build? If you are clear about that, it will determine a whole lot of other things. So these are the issues I think people are dealing with.
Praise, I think that the last part of what you just said is touching a bit on this question. I saw it coming. I'm like, this is a very common problem that we see. Is it possible to actually build a family culture when both spouses are not on the same page?
Again, the question I would ask is, why did you marry someone that you're not on the same page with? It's a big question, and I find it's now becoming very consistent. Can two work together except they agree? People marry people that they are not on the same page with. And that's why, I was having a class yesterday. You remember you were on that class? And I asked a simple question. When you were making a list of the qualities of a spouse you wanted for yourself, did you put wealth there? He must be wealthy or she must be wealthy. Almost everyone in class did not put it there. Why would you want to take a decision for the rest of your life and you didn't put wealth there? And I know why they didn't put wealthy there. Because they will be perceived as materialistic.
As gold diggers, yeah.
And gold diggers. Is it not gold we are going to use to run the family? Right? Why would I want to make? So it's like I'm saying pick a house for yourself, and you are still picking the house in the village. It says something about your sense of worth and sense of perception of yourself. Right? And many of us fell victim because maybe we joined a religious society. And so we made choices. We thought it was our choice, but it was not our choice. It was the choice of what they conditioned us to believe. So when both of you are not on the same page, the starting point is to be on the same page. And being on the same page, you're going to ask the question, what is your definition of a male and a female? Can we start from there? How do you see woman being? How do you see women? How do you see men? How do you see husband? How do you see wife? Because once we don't have mutual definition of terms, we can't even go far. And when that is now done, okay, What type of family do you want to build? Once we are clear about that, what are the gaps? So in strategy triad, the bottom line is the first thing. What outcome do we want? What type of family do we want to raise? The second pillar is the internal capacity. And internal capacity is asking, do we have all it takes to build this? If we don't have, what are the gaps? So some of you upgrade in behavioral, whatever. Oh, you don't, based on your communication, we can't build this thing. So are there courses we can take? Is there someone that can guide us through this thing? There must be humility on both sides. See, eventually, if they're not on the same page, one person is going to be dying for the other person to leave. And the day that person gain power is going to be on their way out. Right? And that is why we both need to, I interviewed 30 couples who divorced. And I asked all of them, if the reward for staying together for 40 years is that the economy of Japan will be given to your family, would you still have gone through divorce? All of them said no. Even the ones who were beating their wife said, praise, I would never have laid hands on her. So it means the stake was not big enough. And it brings to the question, why did you marry this person? Right? So I tell people, if you are given to knowledge, stop marrying people from your village because if you can't communicate at the same level, you're going to run into trouble. Right? So don't marry because the next person. You've got to ensure that you're intellectually compatible. In fact, there's a culture compatibility test we take people through that shows the belief system. And if somebody, so when we say, don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever is someone who doesn't believe what you believe. You believe everybody should cook as a woman. He believes you are the only one that must cook. That's unequal yoke. Don't even deal. Right? To now deal and now be insisting, it's not going to work. Right? So, however, if you're already in this, there are ways to subliminally change people. But it's not going to be on your terms, it's going to be on their terms. Right? And it might start with, oh, sweetheart, how do you see me? I really want to know. Oh, I see you as my wife. What does that mean? Oh, you're my queen. But I don't feel so. What do you mean? The way you talk to me, I don't have a say in this family. All right. And that's why I really, really want to know, how would you want to see me? Okay. So what would you see that will make me look like, okay, this and this and this? Can we sit together and plan this family? Right. Sometimes these guys don't even know. So when both of you are not on the same page, it goes back to, why did you marry? What is your family vision? Because once vision is in place, you'll be on the same page. Yeah.
Absolutely. It help you ask the right questions. Okay, the questions are coming in. This one says, my 11-year-old child goes to the park to play with friends after school. I've asked him to stay home and play with his siblings. He does not get it. What should I do?
He goes to the park to play with his friends because that's they are in the same level, and then the conversations they are having is very similar. What you can do is to make it win-win. Let him play at the park and come and teach his siblings the play. He played at the park. It's that simple. As much as it's good to bond with our siblings, most of what we will need in life is going to be in the hands of external people. And so if you don't build relationships, right, you would realize that. So every time they now say, oh, we need a network to do something, you realize that some people don't have anybody outside their siblings because they've spent, see, there is nothing I can do that will make my siblings not realize I'm still their sibling. So you are not trying to win your sibling over. It's the outsiders who are not your sibling that you're trying to win, right? And so that child is showing some tendencies that you shouldn't kill. So let him play, but let him come back home and now teach his children the kind of play he played, right? So that they are not also left out. So they can eat your cake and have it.
Absolutely. Like what kind of play are they playing in the park? What can he replicate that with the siblings? If they can't, then that's already a gap. Like it's almost like you're taking away something they like and you want them to replace it with something that's available, not necessarily what they like. So like Praise said, it can be a win-win. Just make sure that you're not in the way of that child expressing something that can be a strength in the future.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting question from Jude. It says, parents moving around with trauma. Please, what are you referring to? Is it the values instilled in us in a tough way, the style of discipline, what we saw growing up, attributes that have built resilience? So basically talking again about that, the trauma that parents are moving with, to talk a little bit
You've
about that.
addressed everything. Trauma can come in. So let's take discipline or punishment. The way we punish, because what we call discipline is not discipline. Our discipline is punishment majorly, or domestication,
Domestication,
right?
right?
So you say your child um, took meat from the pot, right? You call it stealing. He stole meat. Now, what is your immediate response? You yell, shouted on him, and maybe you flogged him, say you so that you will never steal again, right? But did you do a root cause analysis to find out why did he steal? For many of us who are in my generation who are listening to me, who stole meat from the pot, why did you steal meat from the pot? Let us start from there. Very simple. Daddy is eating, and daddy has 6 meats. Mommy has 4. Then the size of the meat is now dependent on age. Your firstborn, you have some. Then the last born, God help you. They now
Oh
give
my
you
God.
the leg of chicken, not the thigh. That leg. I don't know the meat inside that leg. But they don't just give you the leg. They now put a condition that you must finish your food before you eat that meat. That's already trauma. So you have
Oh, praise, I'm sorry for laughing. My father has 16 children and I'm number 14. I'm just thinking, like, if they had shared meat in the order of age, man.
So you are wondering, what did I do to deserve this thing? And so what you did was to go help yourself. So say nobody's fighting for me. So you are not seeing the quest for this child to liberate himself, to say, I deserve big meat. That's what he's agitating for. So what you beat out of him is, you are greedy. You don't deserve big meat. So by beating him, he stops stealing. But his quest to aspire for things at the highest level has already been beaten out of him too. So you don't consider the opportunity cost. And also the fact that he's never going to tell you anything again, because nobody cared to know his desire. So many a time when we say, oh, we turn out right, we were well domesticated. We don't steal. We don't lie, right? We are well behaved in our places of work. In fact, if people are stealing, we are not the ones who steal. So we win accountant of the year. The only problem is that the profit of that business, we don't know what is being spent to promote, because we also never feature at that level, right? And how many of us can confront our leaders? We hate them, but when they show up, we are forced to praise them, right? And so before you abuse the president now, you consider whether you're in Nigeria or you're not in Nigeria, because they can send SSS to pick you, DSS to pick you, right? And so that there are 20 differences between domestication and discipline, right? And so in discipline, for example, your mistake is a learning experience. In domestication, your mistake defines you. You kissed a girl, they caught you. 5 years later, they are still referring to it. Remember, that was how you went to kiss that girl. That was how you went to kiss that girl. Love does not keep a record of wrongs, right? You went to school, you wanted to go for a party, you told your parents, they said, don't go for the party. So you learn how to lie because you wanted to socialize. They're not going to consider that socialization is a lie. And so it's straight jacketed. Life is not right, it's not two-dimensional. There are several dimensions. I am for discipline. But where your discipline makes the person feel less than a human being, your discipline already has a problem, right? And so there are creative ways. Take Netherlands. Netherlands have what they call syntax. Syntax is a way to curtail excesses of people who want to commit sin. They pick syntax from the wages of sin is death. So what do? You want to fornicate. We don't believe in prostitution, but we know human will. You want to patronize prostitution. Yes, go and patronize prostitution. Sleeping with a prostitute is 20 euros. But the tax on sleeping with a prostitute is 120 euros. So can you see what they've done? So the tax is more than the sin you want to go and commit. So pay for the sin. What do they use the same tax to do? Cancer treatment. You want to smoke, cigarette, maybe €1, but the tax on it takes it to another level, right? That's a creative way. We always believe that shouting, yelling is what is the same thing as correction. No, wherever the word of the king is, there is power. If your son,
Mhm.
you engage, any change that is not self-generated cannot be self-sustained. So many
Absolutely.
of us, we don't have confidence in ourselves. We have our esteem stem from all this. We want to make you turn out better. We want to make you turn out. We say we turn out better is relative. That you built a house, you bought a car, you have some landed property. It's not turning out better. In the global scheme of things, where do we feature? When we want to discuss how to move the world forward, how to go to Mars, our people of our report card, do they show up there? Right? If they don't show up there, it's already a feedback. The children who show up there, what was the conditioning like? How were they able to show up? Because if your spirit is not free, you can innovate at certain level. You can
Absolutely.
maintain and sustain, but maybe not innovation. So
Yeah.
that's what we are talking about. Once you are fearful, once you get angry easily, once you can't stand the success of someone else around you, those are trauma response. Once
Okay.
anything doesn't go your way, your response is to get angry. It's a trauma.
Yeah. Okay, Jude, I hope that answers your question. If you have any follow-up questions, please put that in the chat, in the comment box. As we begin to wrap this conversation up, praise, so that we can leave something practical with the parents who have joined and have now identified the areas, identified the gaps where they need to work on, and don't have any idea where they can start from. Well, I have a resource that can help you start that journey before, even though at the end of the day, you're still going to need a professional. Like if there are specific things that are in the past that are unresolved, you're still going to need a professional to walk through some of those processes. But for starters, I have one resource, Unbroken. So let's talk about this. We waited so long for praise. I was one of the people who bullied praise. I can admit in public. I was one of the people who had this conversation to say, Praise, when are we going to get a book? Ask these questions. Unbroken is finally here. Praise has finally written this book. So, Praise, I want you to talk a bit about Unbroken. I have read the book. Some of the things that you have talked about here today, I have seen in the book, like the practical steps to write a family vision. I saw that in this book. So, for the parents on the call, you're looking for a place to start. Unbroken is a very, very good place for you to start. So please tell us a bit about Unbroken. Like, what was the idea? How did you? It's like a textbook. Like when I read it, it's like a textbook with like practical things that couples can do after every chapter. Like you will be forced to sit down and write and ask
Yeah.
the right questions so that you can build those systems that we've been talking about. Tell us a bit about this. It's like an MBA textbook. Like when I read it,
Yes.
that's the vibe that I get. Like, okay, this is master's level material. So
That
please tell us a bit about the idea behind Unbroken and what are you hoping that this will do for couples?
that was what my professor said. My professor said, Praise, you didn't write a book. He said you wrote a textbook that every family should have. I spent 11 years studying couples who have done 45 years to 60 years in marriage. And why did it take me 11 years? I wanted to know why their marriages work. And almost everyone told me it was prayers. But I know people who are prayer warriors and the marriages broke. So I realized that there were things they were doing that they did not even know that they were doing. They were unconsciously competent. Maybe they observe other people. So we decided to sit with them, observe them over a period of 11 years to understand what they were doing. And so, based on the 11 things I gathered, was why we first started running it as family marital formation, in which became a part of the certification program. And then we were tracking what people were doing with it, and it was working. And so I decided to start writing, the book. It took me 5 years to write the book. Start it. When you have so much to pour out, it becomes tough. People know.
Mhm.
And I didn't want it to be too big because I understand that people don't even have the luxury of that time. And I wanted some. So I was playing in my idea of I wanted to write something romantic, but then people can learn, right? Poetic. and then without tuning down what I wanted them to, and then they can reflect. So I wanted a combination of a romance novel with therapy, right, and systems intelligence. So why it took me so long, I'm a perfectionist in some of these things, was how do I ensure that I'm able to? Fortunately, I was in the UK and I was supposed to fly to um, Edinburgh, and then all the planes were not flying that day. But I had to be in Edinburgh because I was taking a seminar, a workshop, and so I had to go by train. And so 6 hours to Edinburgh and six back. That was 12 hours in the train. Now, if you're taking the train from London to Edinburgh, you see the countryside, very beautiful. So it kind of put me in the mood to write. And that was where I started putting it together. I wanted things that people can relate with. And I wanted a manual that when you get it, if you follow it, you can literally build a system from scratch, right? And so everything in there were the things I learned from the sample space that we studied over a period of time, right? And so the feedback has been massive. I mean, people have been going through it and they're asking me the same question: how are you able to compress so much in such short time, and in the book that is not so big like that? So it's something I recommend strongly for every family, because that's a good place to start having this conversation. I mean, if
Absolutely.
you don't, you say you can't afford a professional, at least you can afford the book. Yeah,
And people can find this book on Amazon,
yeah,
right?
It's on Amazon. Yeah,
Is the book available on Audible?
no, we have not done Audible yet. It's on Amazon. It's on. I think Walmart has a print on demand, and several other. I mean, it's almost on every platform that prints
Yeah.
books. Yeah.
Okay. So this question came up while you were speaking, and it says, is our way of family systems currently modeled after our heritage or the West? Is monogamy our culture?
Um. Again, I don't believe in the concept called West or concept called whatever. I would rather stick with what promotes the dignity of persons. Am I for monogamy or polygamy? I'm indifferent. But if you want to do polygamy as a man, from the time you met your first wife, let her know I'm a polygamist. I don't have capacity to manage one woman.
Yeah.
Is it okay for you? Is it a deal breaker for you? So that she knows from the get-go that this man is our husband. It's not cannot be my husband. And there are women who don't mind that. In fact, there are cultures, 7 cultures in the world where the woman is the one that can pick more husbands. So if you're a woman, you know that you can manage 5 husbands. Let the man know that me is 5. I'm going to. In fact, there's a culture where a woman married 3 husbands, and the husband runs on shift. So there's a husband from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. is done as the husband. The second one takes over from 2 p.m. to about 8 p.m. Then the third one is from 9 p.m. till 7 a.m. That's the way they run their life. No divorce, nothing. It's a culture somewhere in Kenya, right? And so, full disclosure is what I always promote. And so, the West have just built it, even though they have now also gone to another extreme. Now they are trying to undo everything that has worked. There are people who did polygamy and it worked for them. My grandfather was a polygamist, but you will never know. You would think that everybody in that family was given birth to by the same woman because of the way he ran it. I had to ask my mom, how did he do it that all of you are disunited? Right? And my mom began to explain what the man believed. So there are people who can, if that's what you want, my take is don't go and deceive somebody that is monogamy you want to practice. I think that part of what maybe Christianity has done is to make people pretend to be who they are not. If tendency you have is to marry more than one, let it be open, let it be known, tell everybody, so that the kind of women who can put up with you will marry you, not someone who
Absolutely.
wants my husband and then
Yeah.
so it's our way of family system currently. We don't even have a system, that remember that anything that doesn't promote the dignity of persons should not even stay. So that's where I answer that question.
Okay, Anthony, is your question answered? I hope it is. Find your kind, agree from the beginning. Don't shift the goalpost in the middle of the game. That's just all we're saying, so that it's not going to lead to further issues along the way. Praise, there's a whole group of people that we haven't touched, and I already see a subsequent conversation about that, which is the people who are single, who haven't yet committed to anybody, like in the sense of like a marital relationship. For the people who are single because they were married before, they have left the marriage and they are now looking to maybe explore that area again. How do they make sure they don't make the same mistakes? Or the people who are single for whatever reason and are looking to become what's the word, get into like the marital relationship. I feel like that part, as a single person, the advantage is almost like you are at the point where you haven't committed, which means that you still hold a lot of the aces. There's so many things that you can change at this point.
Yeah.
But then there's that concept of there are no husbands abroad. If you migrate from your home country, it's single, you are going to say single like that. I don't want us to touch on that yet. I want that to be our subsequent conversation.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to start from. So if you're on this call, you're single, and most of the things we've talked about today about marriage and parenting, you couldn't 100% relate because that's not your current reality. There's going to be a follow-up of this conversation, and that's where we're starting from. Especially the singles in diaspora. The things that we hear, the things that we see, the quality of the men that the women are complaining about, the quality of the women the men are complaining about. Everybody's complaining. So who wants to marry? Who is now going to marry what we're seeing? What exactly? So that's where we're going to start from next time. I'm just going to scroll through to do one quick check to see if there is any other question that is pending. I don't see that. Well, thank you so much, Praise, for your time today. It has been such an amazing and a very enlightening session. For all of those of you who stayed from beginning to the end, you will agree that this was actually very expository. It was a masterclass. For those of you who didn't see this from the beginning, you get an opportunity to watch the replay. It's going to be on my channel shortly, so you can watch that and you can share it with people because there's so much to learn. For me, especially with our communities that are now growing outside of our countries of birth, there's so much for us to learn. There's so much that we can do together. Because at the end of the day, we all say that we move from our home countries because we want to give our children a better life. It's now very obvious that we don't even know what that means. We have not defined what that better life means. And because of that, we're seeing things that on a normal day, this doesn't make sense and it flies. So I hope that we're all able to watch this again, take some time to really ask those questions. And while you're at it, go on Amazon and order a copy of Unbroken. This is an amazing place to start, guys. I've read this book cover to cover. I have gone through the training that Praise was talking about. And when I read this book, it was like I could bring it home. Like all of the training that I learned, I could bring it home and apply to myself, like ask myself questions. Some of the answers, when I wrote them down, I'm like, wow, I'm a bit embarrassed to admit some of the things that this book is asking me to do. Like, tell yourself the truth. And that's what Unbroken is going to help you do. The book will literally change your life. It changed my perspective on how I see things. It changed the meanings that I associated with certain experiences in my life. And I want you to have that same experience as well. Unbroken is on Amazon for whatever region you're in. So do well to search it out. It's Unbroken by Praise Fowowe. The price, I think, is going to depend on your region, whatever currency it is. Praise, is there like so for those of us in Canada, like go on Amazon. Somebody's asking how much.
Yeah,
I don't know where they are.
Is Amazon Canada? It's there. I think it's about $35 Canadian dollars. I'm not sure now, but I mean it's on Amazon Canada. If you're in America,
is it on Amazon Nigeria as well?
Nigeria does not have Amazon. If it's in Nigeria, they can. If you go to familyhouseafrica.com/unbroken, you'll be able to get it.
I am typing that right now. familyhouseafrica.com/unbroken.
Unbroken, yeah, you should.
So it seems like most of the friends I have who order things from Amazon either use like VPN or the route it through somebody else. I thought we had access from Nigeria as well.
No,
so I've put the link. I've put the link on the chat and it's on the screen right now. familyhouseafrica.com/unbroken. You can get a copy of the book from there. Thank you again, Praise. I don't believe that we've been having this conversation for over an hour. It felt like we just started, but it's been over an hour, and I'm going to give you some time back. Thank you very much for investing your time and doing this to come and teach us. For those of you who are here, you enjoyed the conversation. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to have the follow-up conversation where we can start to talk about the singles and where you can make the right decision from the start so that you prevent any further issues down the line. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. Always such a pleasure to have you here. And until I come your way in the next video, it is Marina, as always, saying thank you for all of your support as usual. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.